Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. These slides are actually prepared for a workshop. It's called the Mind Life Workshop, which is about how to practice mindfulness in daily life. My workshop is actually 1.5 days, but I'm given only 1 hour. But today I think I've got only half an hour. So it's not going to be a workshop, it's going to be a talk shop. I'm just going to talk and just going to listen. I don't think you're going to have any time to do any practice. First of all, I must express my gratitude to Sister Joan Wong, who prepared these professional slides based on my Lao Ya slides. Okay, because she's a professional layout artist. Why do we want to practice in daily life? Why not just go to a retreat once or twice a year and do the practice in a retreat situation? So much more conducive. Well, if you do it in a retreat situation, then it's not so real. And then when you come back to your daily life, it's not so easy to apply what you have practiced in a very controlled environment. And besides, if you just practice in a retreat, you might be able to get some spectacular insights while you're on retreat. But when you come out back to the world, because your mind was not trained to operate or to meditate or to practice mindfulness in a real life situation, then it's very difficult to apply what was learned in an intensive retreat situation. I have been encouraging people to practice mindfulness in daily life, not as a replacement for intensive retreats, but something which is complementary and supplementary. When you practice in daily life, then when you go on an intensive retreat, you can settle down faster. And so actually they complement one another. In addition to that, you will get certain benefits by practicing in daily life. First, you can reprogram your mindset through direct personal experience. Secondly, you can understand your thoughts and emotions more, because that's what you're going to be seeing most of the time in your daily life. Whereas in an intensive retreat situation, you temporarily suspend all your responsibilities and obligations, and you go there and your mind becomes calm and serene, no thoughts, no emotions. If you're doing a samatha retreat, you're just focusing on your breath, maintaining your nimitta. It's very nice and peaceful. But when you come out to the world, you won't be able to do that. Right? You'll be bombarded by all the sense stimulus. So here is a practical application. You train your mind to get used to all these external stimuli. When you understand your thoughts and emotions more, then you begin to be more accepting of yourself and of others. This will become clearer to you towards the end of the talk. Unfortunately, we wouldn't have the time to do any practical. In my workshops, we start off with practical. We go off, take a walk, and come back after that to go through these lectures. And then we can carry on the next day by going for another walk. And we can practice while we are walking. Because when you're walking, you're exposed to a lot of sense stimuli. And you have to train your mind to be able to handle them and to see how your mind reacts to them. So when you're able to understand your thoughts and emotions more and begin to be more accepting and forgiving of yourself and others, it's easier to let go. Now, when you let go, then you get more contentment and happiness in life. Now, there are 3 major factors which are very important for effective practice of mindfulness in daily life. In fact, whether you practice mindfulness in daily life or in a retreat situation, these three factors are still very important. The first is mindfulness, sati. If you have sati or mindfulness, then this will eventually lead to samadhi, composure. But your sati or mindfulness must be continuous as you can manage. When you have composure, then wisdom can arise. And this is clear awareness. I purposely use the word awareness because I want to differentiate it from mindfulness. Because a lot of people tend to equate mindfulness with awareness. But they're actually a bit different, which I shall explain in subsequent slides. The Pali word for clear awareness is sampajanya. Sometimes it's translated as clear comprehension. That is the more popular translation. Now, since this talk shop is about mindfulness, let's start off by understanding what mindfulness is. I'm sure that most people here would have heard that mindfulness is present moment awareness, correct? This is a very popular understanding or interpretation of mindfulness as it is being practiced in secular application. Nowadays, the practice of mindfulness is sweeping the world like nobody's business in all aspects of life, not only in a spiritual sense, not only in psychotherapy, but also in the corporate world, in sports, in education, and even in the US Army. So, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is an English translation of the Pali word sati. And sati means awareness of a past object. In the whole of the Pali language, there is only one word for to remember, and that is sarati, which is the verb of sati. Sati is a noun. So if sarati is a verb, then what is a noun? Remembrance, correct? And what does the word remembrance connote? It connotes awareness of a past object, correct? You can remember only something of the past, not of the present. And yet, people equate mindfulness with present moment awareness. Isn't there something wrong? How do you reconcile that? There is a way of reconciling. Depends on whether you are using conventional language or you're using very technical language that is concerned with microanalysis. It's very much like Newtonian physics and quantum physics. Newtonian physics is about the macro scale, about big bodies. Quantum physics is about subatomic particles, small, minute bodies, and they have different laws. Anyway, I was very curious about this, why mindfulness has been translated or interpreted as present moment awareness. And I've been doing a lot of research for many, many years, looking through the scriptures, as well as my own personal practice and the experience of yogis during interviews. And I found that there are actually 4 important aspects of mindfulness that can help us in our practice. And these 4 important aspects of mindfulness are applicable not only in the spiritual sense, but also in the material world. In fact, these 4 aspects of mindfulness are universal and essential for the successful and effective survival of any organism. I call that the 4 R's. The first one is to remember. To remember while collecting information or listening to instructions. Right? For instance, now you're listening to me. If you don't make a willful effort to remember what I tell you, then when you get out of this hall, and then you meet somebody along the road, and somebody asks you, what was the talk about? Well, it's an interesting talk, very nice slides. But what is it about? Can't remember lah. Right? If you don't make a willful effort to remember, you won't remember. You won't be able to recall, to recollect what you had memorized. And this is very essential for students, correct? When you read a book, when you read your textbooks, you have to make a willful effort to memorize them so that during exam time you can recollect what you have memorized and answer the questions. And it's not only confined to students, anyone. If you're working in the corporate world also, you need to make a willful effort to remember the instructions of your superior and policies of your company, and then recollect them when you need the information. The third aspect is to remind. The third R, to remind yourself. This is especially relevant in the spiritual path, because nowadays we have many educational institutions which offer Buddhism as a subject. There may be people there who sit for diplomas and degrees and get PhD, very good memory, they can memorize a lot of things, and they can write a lot of very long theses quoting a lot of citations from different sources. This is got to do with remember and recollect. But if they don't remind themselves to put these teachings into practice, then what good will there be? It's good only in the sense that, you get academic recognition, you come up with lots of papers. But if you don't put those principles of Buddhism into actual practice, you don't remind yourself to do so, then it defeats the whole purpose of Buddhism. The whole purpose of Buddhism, of learning Buddhist doctrines, is not because you want to pass exams. It's not because you want to get a degree. It's because you want to understand how to put them into practice. Right? So once you understand, you have to remind yourself to do so. So this is the third important aspect of mindfulness, the third R. And the last one is called retrospect. I use the word retrospect in a special way because nowadays the word retrospect or retrospection is used in a different way. Conventionally, when you talk about retrospection, you are reflecting about some past events and probably regretting over them. Correct? In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that, for example. In retrospect, it wasn't such a good thing for me to say. Correct or not? So it's something that you recall something that happened in the past with regret. There's a negative connotation involved. But I use the word retrospect here in a literal sense because the word retrospect is made of two Latin words, retro and spect. Retro means back and spect means to look, right? So it is to look back at what had happened. And this is where present moment awareness comes in. Present moment awareness is actually concerned with the last R. So remember, these 4 R's of mindfulness: remember, recollect, remind, and retrospect. Why the last R, retrospect, can be reconciled with the concept of present moment awareness will soon become clear to you. Remember the 3 elements, 3 major factors required for successful or effective practice of mindfulness. And the first one is sati, mindfulness. And with continuous mindfulness, that will lead to composure. What is composure? Composure is my translation of the Pali word samadhi. Samadhi is usually translated as concentration, but I prefer to translate it as composure, because the word concentration might give a misleading connotation. Samadhi literally means properly bring and place the mind. Samadhi is a Pali word composing of three parts: sang, a, and di. Sang means properly, a means bring, and di means place. So properly bring and place the mind where you want it to be placed. And you can only do that if you are not distracted by thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Most people are not composed because their minds are all cluttered with a lot of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Correct? So many thoughts that you can't even distinguish clearly one thought from another. And emotions and thoughts and perceptions all jumbled up together. And because of that, you don't have composure. You cannot properly bring and place the mind where you want to. You are distracted. That's why in the Pali Canon, Samadhi is defined as non-distractedness of mind. The mind is not distracted. So, in order to compose the mind, we need to do something. But before we do that, it's important to understand one very important principle about the features of the six senses. I call this the 5-6-1 principle. The 5 here refers to the 5 senses. The 6 here refers to the 6th sense, which is the mind. And finally, the 1 here refers to the object that the mind can take. Now, the 5 senses can only take present objects. Your eyes can only see something which is right in front of you, here and now. Same for your ears, your nose, your tongue, and your body. You can't hear the music that you heard last night if your player is not on and is not plugged into your ears. Correct? But the mind is different. The 6th sense, the mind can take objects of the past, present, and future, and imagination, fantasy, and beyond. A very classic example is, well, you saw something last night. Maybe you saw TV or video last night. Can you see with your eyes now? You can't because it's not open in front of you. But can you picture it in your mind? Yeah, it's a past object. For most of us, our minds cannot take future objects. For most of us, we only make projections of the future based on our past experience, correct? But there are some people who have got EXP, extra sensory perception. And these are the people who really can see the future. But it's a special power of the mind. Some people don't have this natural capacity, but they can develop through mindfulness, through training, and develop the mind so that it can actually take future objects. I'd like to share this story of one such person who has got a natural ESP. I was conducting a mindful hiking retreat in Singapore last year. And as we were hiking through one of the parks, we had to cross a slippery log, crossing a marshy area. One of the hikers had this ESP, and she was at the back. And there was one other lady hiker in front of her. And this lady knew that she's going to fall. So she got her handphone ready and took a video of her falling into the marsh. Usually, you won't have the time. When somebody falls, it's too late by the time you get out your video. But because she had this premonition, she knew that it's going to happen. And from her own experience, a lot of times, there's nothing she can do to stop what's going to happen in the future. We don't know whether that's a boon or there's a curse. There's also this very interesting story about Sun Lun Seador. Sun Lun Seador is quite an extraordinary person. He lived in the pre-war days in Myanmar. He was an illiterate farmer. Couldn't read, couldn't write. And he was married, he had a wife but no children. Sometime in his life, he certainly had an urge to learn how to meditate. So he asked one of his friends, how to meditate? And he said, very simple. All you need to do is to watch your breath. In breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. So that's what he did. He just sat down and watched his breath, in breath, out breath. And then he got composure. His mind was not distracted. Also because he was just an illiterate farmer, so not as hooked up as you people here, Not so many distracting thoughts and emotions and perceptions. And very strangely, soon after he got his mind composed, he could have this premonition. And he was a very frank person, very tit. And so after he practiced and then he had this composure, he walked along the road and he would meet up with one of his friends and then he would say, hey, you better be careful, you're going to get sick next week. And then truly it happened. But even worse is foretelling something worse that's going to happen. You're going to get an accident, you're going to die. And people saw that many of his predictions were accurate, they kept away from him. They'd rather not know the truth. Ignorance is bliss. But what happened to him was, he didn't stop there, he went on to meditate and eventually he became a stream enterer, once returner, a non-returner. And after he became a non-returner, he decided to become a monk. So he became a samanera. And after he became a samanera, he meditated and became an arahant. That's a story told in Myanmar. And as you know, there are many scholars in Myanmar. So when these scholar monks heard that this person is supposed to be an arahant, they came to question and interrogate him and see whether he's really an arahant. And these were scholars, So they were satisfied that he was one. And even one scholar had studied the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, before. He's not a practitioner, but he knows the text. And he taught this new arahant how to develop the psychic powers. But he himself doesn't have any experience, He taught him based on the Visuddhimagga. And so eventually he also got psychic powers. And very interestingly, he was very curious how he, being an illiterate farmer, could attain such a high state of enlightenment. And so he made use of his psychic power to look back into his past lives. Recollecting one's past life is Pubbe Nivasa Nusati. The word sati is there. Recollecting your past life. And he found that during Kassapa Buddha's time, that's our previous Buddha before this one, he was a bird. And somehow that bird had some urge to want to dana the Buddha Kassapa. So the bird went to pick some fruits, some berries maybe, and then went to offer Kassapa Buddha. And it's amazing that that little seed could have resulted eventually in him becoming an arahant. And he also said that he was reborn in many existences as animals in the animal kingdom. It was only much later that he became a human being, and even then he is illiterate. But the seed has been sown, and it seems that it has borne fruit in a very great way. Anyway, coming back to the 561 principle, the five senses can only take present objects. The sixth sense can take objects of the past, present, future, imagination, fantasy, and beyond. Another important feature of the six senses is that the sixth sense, the mind, can only take one object at a time. And you might protest and say, that's not true. Now I'm seeing you, I'm hearing you, I know that I'm sitting, I'm doing so many things at a time. And in the office, I can multitask. Especially if I'm a housewife, I can multitask. I take care of the children, of the cooking, the husband, of my other stuff as well. But that's an illusion. On the macro scale, you think that you are multitasking. On the micro scale, you are not. And neuroscientists have proven that. They have wired their subjects and put them to a multitasking job. And then they monitor what's going on in the brain. And they found that when a person is put onto a multitasking job, actually different parts of the brain are being stimulated at any single time that they are attending to a particular task. They're not happening simultaneously. But the mind works so fast, you think that it's simultaneous. Now, understanding this principle of the features of the six senses is very important. Why? Because what makes the mind not composed is because of getting involved with thoughts about the past mostly, or projections about the future, correct? But since the mind can only take one object at a time, what if you train the mind to disengage from all this compulsive thinking about the past and the future and anchor it to the five senses? Since the five senses can only take present object, if they are busy with the five senses, then they won't have time to think of the past or the future. Now, understanding this principle is central to how to make the mind composed. So now I'm going on to the next section on how to compose the mind based on this 5-6-1 feature of the six senses. I've coined an acronym for that. The first thing you need to do is to accept the fact that feelings, perceptions, and thoughts are natural activities of the mind. They arise due to causes and conditions. Well, initially you may not be able to see these causes and conditions. You may not be able to relate how these thoughts, feelings, and perceptions arise due to certain causes and conditions. But it's okay. You accept it on faith. When you accept it on faith, then it's easy to accept them instead of fighting with them. A lot of people have this idea that when one meditates, you're supposed to be thoughtless, thought-free, no thought, cannot think. So when they start to meditate, of course they'll be assailed by a lot of thoughts. And then because they have this idea that I'm meditating, I'm not supposed to think, then they'll fight with the thoughts. Right? And this creates a lot of stress. And on top of that, if you are doing focused awareness, you're focusing on your rising and falling or your breath, and they're not always clear, you try to make them clear so that you will stay there and not get caught up in your thoughts. So what you do is you manipulate your breath, and that causes even more stress. And sometimes you manipulate it so much that the breathing just stops. You cannot feel it anymore. Okay, so the first thing is accept that the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions arise due to causes and conditions. Accept them. Don't fight with them. Right? So don't reject them, don't follow them, and also don't simply ignore them. Now, if you are doing a focused awareness or pure samatha sort of exercise, where you just focus on your breath or your rising and falling, and you ignore any other objects, that can quickly steal your mind. Your mind can be composed. You're free of thoughts. But it doesn't give you wisdom. Because in order for wisdom to arise, the mind must be exposed to an overview of things so that wisdom can connect causes and conditions. see how things work. Right? If you're just focused on one subject, you ignore everything else, you get calmness, peace, serenity, no wisdom. If you don't ignore them, what do? You acknowledge them. You know what thoughts they are. This is a thought. This is about something that happened in the past. This is a thought about something that might happen in the future. This is a feeling of frustration, anger, whatever. You acknowledge what it is. And after that, what do? After that, you anchor yourself to the five senses. Now, if you're doing focused awareness, you can come back to your breath, to your rising and falling. But if you are doing open awareness, which is coming back to the five senses, then you just come back to any of the five senses. Anything that you see, hear, smell, taste, and feel with the body. For example, right now, you are listening to me, correct? Can you also be aware of your body? You can. But before I said that, you probably weren't, because you were trying to listen intently to what I was saying. But now, try to now place your attention on the body while you're listening to me. When you do that, there's a different feeling. You get a sense of objectivity. Correct or not? You're stepping back to look at things and an overview of things, not absorbed in the content of my speech. Another thing that you could do is, now that you are looking at me, try to defocus. Don't focus on me. Focus on the space in between you and me. Can you do that? Okay, when you do that, also it gives you a sense of objectivity. You are stepping back to look at things as a whole. You're no longer absorbed in the contents of what I'm saying. Right? So this is a very good way of practicing objectivity, of practicing mindfulness in daily life, particularly when you are involved in heated board meetings and discussions. Step back. Don't jump into an argument. Step back, be aware of your body, be aware of the space in between you and the other person you are talking to. That will give you a sense of objectivity. Now, when you practice coming back to the senses, let's say while you are not actively engaged in a conversation, say you're just sitting down on an armchair or a chair, or just sitting in the park or by the seaside, and you want to practice open awareness, then what you do is just anchor your mind to the senses, whatever it is. Here I've coined another acronym for you. Hey, what happened to that? Oh, the touch and go disappeared already, right? Because it touched and go, so it's not there. Okay. Okay. Now, why do I coin this? Free and easy touch and go. It's something that is easy for you to remember, is catchy, and you can remind yourself. All right? Now, when you come back to the senses, you don't try to fix your attention on one particular sense object. This is different from focused awareness. This is open awareness. You open up your awareness to be aware of things happening around you at the senses. You're not going to focus on one single sense object, like your breath or the rising and falling. So in order to achieve this open awareness, you need to just touch and go. Yeah? Don't linger on to any object. For example, if you're sitting by the beach looking into the sea, right? The most obvious object will be your sight and sounds of the waves, correct? Don't just stick to the sounds of the waves, don't just stick to the view in front of you, touch and go. When the mind is aware of a predominant sense object, then you have to ask the mind, What else can the mind be aware of? Besides just hearing the waves breaking, besides just seeing the view in front of you, what else can the mind be aware of? When you do that, then the mind will automatically go to other objects. Maybe your buttocks sitting on the sand, your clothing in contact with your skin, or your limbs in contact with one another, or maybe thoughts, emotions, perceptions coming and going. Alright, so when you practice open awareness, that's what you do. You just step back and look at things coming and going without interference. Free and easy. What does free and easy mean? Free means you allow the mind to move freely among the senses. Alright? You don't try to restrict the mind to just one object, like the breath or the rising and falling. Okay? You allow it to freely move among the senses. That's what is meant by free. Easy is in the sense of taking it easy. There are many things happening in the senses. You see, you hear, you smell, you taste, especially when you're eating, and then you feel sensations with the body. You don't have to be a perfectionist and try to note every single occurrence. If you try to do that, you're going to get stressed. Too many things are happening. Right? You take it easy. Just step back and allow the mind to pick up whatever it can. That's good enough. So this anchoring your mind doesn't mean taking the anchor beer, okay? That sort of anchor won't make you compose. It'll make you go wild. Okay, so this is the second step, the second important factor that will help you to practice effectively in your daily life. When you have continuous mindfulness, you're able to bring back the mind to the five senses without getting caught up in unnecessary thinking, then your mind will become composed. Alright? But the problem is, we cannot stop thinking altogether. Right? You're living in the world, you have a lot of responsibilities and obligations, you have to fulfill them. So that's why we go on to the next step, clear awareness, in order to be able to distinguish what thoughts you need to follow and what thoughts you need to discard. So when the mind becomes composed, then you can be clearly aware. In the scriptures, clear comprehension or being clearly aware is often defined as being aware of your daily activities. When you are engaged in activities such as going forward and turning back, looking ahead and backwards, bending and stretching your limbs, using your utensils and wearing your clothes, eating, drinking, chewing, tasting, urinating and defecating, going, standing, sitting, sleeping, being wakeful, speaking, being silent. Which part of your life is excluded? Right? You're supposed to be clearly aware when you're engaged in any activity in your life. It covers every aspect of your life. Right? Who says that meditation means only going on an intensive retreat? You're supposed to be clearly aware of whatever is happening to you in every aspect of your life. There's nothing profane about urinating and defecating. Yeah, it could also be a means for you to understand the true nature of reality. But the question is, okay, you're supposed to be clearly aware when you're engaged in all these activities, but clearly aware of what? Are you supposed to be clearly aware of the physical activities or something else? In another sutta in the Satipatthana Samyutta called Sati Sutta, the Buddha says that one should be clearly aware of feelings, thoughts and perceptions when they arise, persist and pass away. Which means to say, Clearly aware encompasses not just the physical awareness, but awareness of what goes on in your mind while you are engaged in those physical activities. You understand? Yeah. In some meditation retreats, they emphasize more on the physical aspect. Yeah. You are aware of the physical sensations, or the movement of your body sensations. But there is more to it than that. You have to be aware of the feelings, thoughts, and perceptions that are happening while you are engaged in these activities. So how do you aware of them? That's why I said earlier, when your mind becomes composed, then you begin to see that there are many thoughts arising in your mind. Initially, you may not even be able to distinguish one thought from the other, one emotion or perception from the other, because they're all mixed up. But when your mind becomes composed, a good sign is that you will see the thoughts are spaced further and further apart. And then you have the space to catch those thoughts and process them before you act on them. Most people are not able to catch that initial urge or thought of wanting to think of something, or say something, or do something. Right? Because they don't have the last R, retrospect, looking back at what had immediately happened. So if you have not trained your mind to catch intentions, then you'll be swept away by all your initial urges of wanting to think or speak or do something. And then you regret later, I shouldn't have wasted my time thinking of all that stuff, it's all useless. Or I shouldn't have said that was very unskillful, caused a lot of trouble. Or I shouldn't have done that, then made a lot of loss because of that. That's because you did not have the space and you did not train the mind to process that initial urge or intentions before you pursued them. So when you are clearly aware of your thoughts, perceptions, and feelings, it means that you are able to process them in a certain way. According to the commentaries, there are 4 aspects that you should need to investigate. And what I've done is created another acronym for you to easier remember. And I call it the bar test. Not the bar code, okay? Bar test. First, you need to find out that initial intention that you have to think of something, to say something, to do something. Is it beneficial? Now, from the Buddhist point of view, applying a very general Buddhist code of ethics, what is beneficial will be something that is not harmful and which is going to be beneficial for yourself and others, correct? But that's on a very broad base. You can apply this to more specific cases. Is it beneficial to me as a parent? And depending on the role that you're playing, is it beneficial to me as an employee, an employer, as a client, as a doctor, as a patient? You play different roles in your life at different times. And so you can actually apply this according to the role that you're playing. Yeah, so this is actually very flexible, but very useful. So when you find that it passes the B, then you go on to the next one, which is appropriate. Well, it may be beneficial, but is it appropriate or not? For example, you see a colleague doing things in a certain way, which you think is not very effective or not very proper, and you want to correct him or her. So you could rationalize that it's beneficial for me, for the company, for this group that I'm working for. But you have to look at the appropriateness of the situation. Is it the right time? Is it the right mood? Is that person in the right mood? Is it the right place to do so? And even more importantly, is the right expression. Are you going to say it rudely or politely, in a tactful way, Yeah? So you have to look at the propriety of the situation. So if he passes the B and the A, then you go on to the next one, which is whether it's relevant. Whether it's your job or not. If it's not your job, better don't try to interfere. You might get into trouble for that. Right? And the second aspect of being relevant is that whatever you want to pursue, if it has passed the B and the A, will it actually conduce to perseverance in carrying out your duties? So that's also another aspect. Then the final one, the last R, is reality. Is it realistic? There are two aspects of this. One is factual, and one is whether it's practical or feasible or doable. Now, the first one, factual, is very important for relationships. Especially when you have certain suspicions about what your partner or your spouse has been doing. If it's not factual, there's no evidence, right? Don't open your mouth, okay? Don't get into trouble for nothing. Go and find out first. If there's evidence, only then you speak, but do so after having passed the BAR. A lot of times we base our decisions on assumptions. And a lot of times we're not really aware that these assumptions may not be true. We think that they are true, and we hold on to them, and then we make a decision, or we say something, or we do something, thinking that this assumption is a fact. But that's not so. It's not a fact. It's only an assumption. But if you're clearly aware, and you know that, okay, I'm making a decision based on this assumption. This assumption may or may not be accurate. But we cannot always wait for facts in order to make decisions. Correct? The important thing is to know that it is an assumption, it may be inaccurate, it may not be factual, and that you may need to change your decision later on. Okay, you need to understand this when you make the decision, so that you don't cling on to the idea that it was true in the first place. And this will also help you to correct your decisions. If you don't have that understanding, then the ego will come in. It is my decision. I made it. I must be right. So when the assumptions turn out to be inaccurate or false, then because of your ego, you don't want to admit that you're wrong. Correct or not? Lots of time, that's what happens. So if you do it with clear awareness, you know that this is only an assumption, and it might not be true, I might have to correct myself later, then it's not so bad. You're already prepared for it. Or you could even say that from the very beginning to whoever is involved in that decision making. And everybody will be aware, and everybody will be willing to change due to updated findings. Okay, so the last one is whether it's doable, feasible, or practical. Yeah? It's an aspect of being realistic. This is quite obvious. If you're going to do something, you have an idea, make sure that it passes through all these bar tests. Now, in conjunction with appropriateness, there is a few suttas, two suttas, where the Buddha talked about well-spoken speech. There's one sutta called Aggacitta Sutta in the Sutta Nipata 3.3, where the Buddha said that there are certain qualities that qualify for well-spoken speech. And here I have given you another acronym, which is we rent. Now we rent a house, we rent a car, or we rent something, right? The we here stands for well-spoken. The person speaks only well-spoken speech. The sutta is about well-spoken speech, and here the Buddha says the first quality is that it must be well-spoken speech. That's not very helpful, is it? It's just like right livelihood is defined in the suttas as here a disciple of the Noble One refrains from wrong livelihood and engages in right livelihood. How helpful is that? Well, luckily we have other suttas to refer to. Okay, anyway, the second one is, R here means righteous. Righteous in the sense of being just, not unjust. Not righteous in the sense of self-righteousness. Sometimes people have this self-righteousness and become very dominating and domineering in their relationship with others. You know, we're not talking about that righteousness. We're talking about being just, not unjust. En here refers to endearing. Endearing means something that's polite, that people like, and not saying something which is rude or impolite. And finally, it is truthful. Okay, so this has got to do with appropriateness. You want to say something, then if you want it to be well spoken, then you must fulfill these qualities. Then there's another sutta called the Vacha Sutta, that's in the Anguttara Nikaya. Here again, the Buddha says, speech that is accompanied by 5 factors is well-spoken speech. Okay, here at least we know what well-spoken speech is. And one of the qualities is not well-spoken speech itself, it's something else. And here I have come up with another acronym. It's called Bet and Tip Me. First one is we rent, and second one is we bet and tip me. You know, like if you tip a waiter, you make a bet and you tip. You make a bet and then you tip. Okay, BE here stands for beneficial. Okay, and the T stands for truthful. Then the TI stands for timely. And the P stands for polite. And the ME stands for with metta. Okay, so this is well-spoken speech. So you will see that there is some overlap, correct? There's an overlap here, for example, in endearing. Endearing is something that is most probably accompanied by metta, and is polite and spoken at the right time, right? So this is somehow overlapping. And then, of course, truthful appears in both of these suttas. Okay. The next thing you need to know is the relationship between sati and sampajanya, mindfulness and clear awareness. Earlier on, I talked about the 3 major factors for effective practice of mindfulness in daily life. And I gave you a sort of a linear connection from mindfulness leading to composure to clear awareness, correct? Now, what is the relationship between mindfulness and clear awareness? They have different roles to play. Mindfulness brings the past object to the mind's attention. You know, the mind has got different departments, and different departments do different jobs. It's just like when you work in a company, you have the finance department, you have the marketing department, you have the public relations department, you have the HR, and so forth. Different departments do different jobs. So here, the job of sati is just to bring a past object to the mind's attention, full stop. There's no wisdom in sati. And sati, as I said earlier, is something very universal. Then we talk about the 4 R's of sati earlier. You don't need to be a Buddhist to have the 4 R's. Any successful student, any successful person in the world would have the 4 R's. Otherwise you would not be able to function successfully as a living being. Even animals have the 4 R's. So the job of sati is very fundamental. It just brings a past object to the mind's attention. After doing that, then that's when sampajanya comes in. Sampajanya will make use of the information and instructions from sati to evaluate and understand the object. Right, so earlier on I was telling you about what to be clearly aware of, of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions as they arise, persist, and pass away. And I said that how do you evaluate? You evaluate in terms of the bar test, which is a sort of a value system. Right? These are all information. Right? And your mind has to process all this information. Your mind has to try to remember them so that you can put that into practice in your daily life. Right or not? So this depends on sati. If you have no sati, you don't have a good memory, what I tell you now goes in one ear and comes out the other ear, how are you going to practice? Okay? That's one thing. Sampajanya depends on the memory of mindfulness. Secondly, sampajanya can only work if mindfulness can look back at what had just happened. Right or not? If you cannot catch your intention, you cannot catch the initial urge to think or say or do something, how are you going to process? Impossible. So that's why you need to have mindfulness before you can practice sampajanya or clear awareness. But again, if your mindfulness is not strong enough, not enough composure, you also will not be able to practice clear awareness. When I say composure, and I want to reiterate, I'm not talking about that one-pointed, focused awareness. I'm talking about the ability to place your mind where you want to without being distracted by thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. And when you practice mindfulness in your daily life using this principle of open awareness, coming back to your senses as often as you can, then what happens is you will see that your obsessive or your compulsive thinking becomes less and less and less, because you train your mind not to get involved in those unnecessary thinking. Now you are more involved in doing productive thinking. I'm not saying that you stop thinking altogether. That's impossible. There are so many things to do in your life. There are so many obligations and responsibilities to fulfill. You have to think, but think only what is productive. How do you know whether it's productive or not? Yeah, you have to use clear awareness. You have to use mindfulness to catch that intention and then process it according to a certain value system that is being remembered by mindfulness. And then only you can decide whether you want to pursue that thought or discard it. Okay, that's from the worldly point of view. Now, when you go a step further, when you practice clear awareness, you go a step further and look at things in terms of the three characteristics. Now, whatever happens, whatever thoughts, feelings, or perceptions that arise in the mind are all anicca, dukkha, anatta. They're impermanent, right? They arise and pass away. Especially when you practice open awareness, it's so obvious. Things come and go without stopping. You know, it's not like you're absorbed in a certain object and nothing happens. You're open to whatever happens in the senses, and everything is changing all the time. Right? So when you incline your mind to look at this, it's very obvious. Things come and go all the time. So you can also understand that it is suffering in the ultimate sense, because there's no way that you can stop things from happening and going away. That's the ultimate suffering, you know. It's not the suffering of stepping on a thorn. It's not a suffering of falling into the drain. That one is very obvious. That's painful suffering. This one is the ultimate suffering, is that you can never stop all these things arising and passing away. As long as you have the senses, they will be there. Then thirdly, you can also understand there's no self there. There's no one in control. All these come and go, even against your wishes. But more importantly, if you can see the cause and condition, why do these things arise and pass away? Okay? These are all due to causes and conditions. So you will need to have more time to do some practice before you can grasp what this means, because it's very profound. To give you a very simple example, like you were walking along the road, and then suddenly you come across somebody that reminded you of another person in the past who had cheated you. And immediately what happens is there's a reaction in the mind. You feel very upset or maybe angry. Okay, look at that thought. Did you purposely think that thought? Or that thought arose by itself? The thought arose by itself. Why? Because of cause and condition. What is the cause? The cause is because your eye came into contact with an object. Correct or not? And what is the condition? The conditioning is that something happened in the past and it's still locked in the memory because there's a connection with the past experience and the present circumstances. So these the present circumstances are the causes, and the past experience and past conditioning are the conditions. So these two will influence the way your mind thinks, the way you react. Now, this is just a very simple example. Actually, this is very, very important because it is at the root of all our habitual reactions. If you cannot see the cause of our habitual reactions, you will always become a slave of your habits. Psychologists have come out with this cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's all about conditioning. It's a matter of recognizing that the way you think and the way you behave is the result of past conditioning. And when you can realize that, then you can let go. If not, you will always become a slave of that past conditioning. This is also the principle upon which past life therapy works. Past life therapy is also about people who have certain disorders which they cannot cure by conventional means, and then finally, the last resort, you go to see this past life therapist, and the past life therapist will guide that person to the root cause of that disorder. And so when this person goes back to a past life with the help of the therapist, then this person can understand the root cause because of some past conditioning which are no longer valid now. So when the patient is able to realize that, very miraculously, that habitual disorder can be alleviated, can actually disappear. So it works on the same principle, understanding cause and condition. But in the case of past life therapy, it is the therapist that acts as sati, or mindfulness, you know. But here we are talking about your own mindfulness. You develop your own mindfulness, not depending on an external mindfulness. Okay, so when that happens, when you're able to see that whatever happens to you, or whatever happens in your mind, or even your body, is a result of causes and conditions, then that's why you can reap the benefits of mindfulness in daily life. You can reprogram your mindset through direct personal experience because you're always looking back at the mind to understand how the mind works, and you know that everything, whatever happens to your mind, thoughts, perceptions, and feelings are all due to causes and conditions. So when that happens, you understand your thoughts and emotions more in terms of the three characteristics, in terms of causes and conditions, and that naturally makes you understand yourself and forgive yourself and others easily. Some meditation teachers say that no one can make you angry, but you make yourself angry. Correct or not? Why are you angry? Because of our expectations. Mostly, you expect people to behave in a certain way, they don't, and that's why we get upset. The cause is not because of them, it's because of us. We cling on to a certain idea, certain expectation, and when the expectation is not fulfilled, we feel upset, feel frustrated, disappointed, angry. But I say that no one makes you angry, not even yourself. It's cause and condition. Correct. What makes you angry is because of ignorance. Because of ignorance and because of craving, of clinging. And that doesn't even belong to you. These are all defilements. As the Buddha said, the mind is luminous, it is defiled by visiting defilements. So these are also visitors, they don't belong to you. Their mind is actually intrinsically pure. Right? Okay, so when you can accept and forgive yourself and others, it's easy to let go, right? Yeah, easy to let go. Everything is due to cause and conditioning. When things don't go your way, then you're able to let go. And it's very liberating, because all the time we have been taught to think that we are in control, right? We have been programmed to think that things should go the way we want them to. But now it's different. Through your personal direct experience, you begin to see that that's not the way it is. But it doesn't mean that you have to be fatalistic. Yeah, everything is due to cause and condition. Don't do anything lah. You know, somebody is suffering, that's his karma lah. But whatever you do right now is also a cause and condition for future effects. Although we cannot be absolutely certain whether what we do now will result in what we have in mind. Because there are so many other factors involved, so many other variables, so many other causes and conditions. What you do now may be a positive cause and condition to actualize an aspiration or an aim. But there could be other causes and conditions due to your past karma which obstruct this. Or there could be other causes and conditions that support this. You know, it depends on a lot of other things. From the Buddhist point of view, we say it's your karma now. Whenever we cannot understand things, we say karma lo. The law of karma is so profound that the Buddha says, if you try to figure out the results of karma, you'll go crazy. And so we accept it on good faith, but at the same time, we are not fatalistic. We try our best, and whatever happens, that's it, we accept it. Okay? So I hope that you will be able to practice mindfulness in daily life and reap these benefits. And also, if you are really very keen on more lofty ideals, being mindful in life, in our daily life, can also help you when you go on a retreat center to strive for liberation. Okay? So let me stop here. Okay. Any questions?
First of all, thanks Bhante for a very enlightening talk today. I refer back to what is mindfulness, the 4R. I'm more interested to the retrospective R, Bhante. Here written as looking back at what had just happened. My question is, do we just at looking back, observing, or do we allow some analytical thinking on it? Analytical thinking. When we look back, do we analyze it? Do we allow some level of judgment on it? When we look back sometimes, looking back, observing, oh, is this right? Is it wrong? Do we judge or we just observe only? Thanks, Bhante.
I already explained this in the roles of sati and sabbajanya, correct? The role of mindfulness is just to look back. The role of sabbajanya or clear awareness is to analyze. So that analysis will depend on the value system that has been remembered by sati. So they are all very, very closely related. Right? Now I also want to talk about sati and sanya. If you're all familiar with Pali, sanya means usually translated as perception. The word perception is a problem, because in English it has got different connotations. Now, in actuality, in terms of experience, I would say that sati is willful memory, and sanya is spontaneous memory. Right? Willful is something that you have to put in the effort to remember. And spontaneous memory is that when you see something, immediately you know there's a man, there's who and who. That's spontaneous memory. But spontaneous memory can also be a result of sati. It's because of sati, initially you put in the effort to remember, then eventually it becomes sanya. It becomes spontaneous memory. Right? So now, when I say you reprogram your mindset to direct personal experience, you are using mindfulness initially, and then eventually that will influence your mind and your sanya will change. And instead of looking at things in terms of control freak, you begin to look at things in terms of cause and conditioning automatically. Yeah, in the old days, before you actually started practice meditation, practice mindfulness in daily life, before you could see into cause and conditioning, you always thought that people were wrong. Someone is to blame somewhere, right? But now it's different. Whenever you see anything that happens, immediately the mind will just go to cause and conditioning, right? So the mindset changes, the way of looking at things changes because of the application of mindfulness that affects your perception. Okay, anyone else?
I just want to ask, because you talk about a lot of analysis, like you keep yourself at the space and all that, but did Sutta touch about like response and reactions? Like, is there any guidance, like how do we react and respond after analyzing all the conditions and the cause? Thank you, Bhante.
This one depends on clear awareness. Clear awareness, like I said just now, you evaluate according to the bar test, and that's really teaching you how to respond in a positive way rather than react in a habitual, unskillful way. Well, that's only on an intellectual level. Now, if you want to go deeper, which you may not have the opportunity to do so in your daily life, because your daily life, you have deadlines to meet, you have to give decisions within a certain time limit, so you can't afford to wait for real intuition to arise. You have to do analysis. Yeah. And in order for analysis to be effective, then you need to have good mindfulness and composure so that your mind can be clear. But if an issue that you are facing is not something very urgent, no deadline, maybe it's a long-term issue, a relationship issue that you have with somebody, and you really want to have an intuitive or real wise decision to arise, then you don't do so much analysis. You just ask the question, why? How? How do I resolve this issue? Because this is a long-standing issue, it will arise again and again, right? You won't miss it. So whenever it arises, you throw in the question, how to resolve this issue? Just ask, but don't analyze. And then come back to your senses, right? So what will happen is that your subconscious works in the background. When all the supporting evidence, all the supporting facts are collected, then the answer will arise. But that's on an intuitive level, and that is something more accurate than just doing intellectual analysis, right? But as I said, you have to be practical. If you have a deadline to meet, then you have to do it in an intellectual way. If you have no deadline to meet, then you can do it in intuitive way. Don't analyze so much. Just ask a question, come back to your senses. Okay. Anyone else?
Is there any difference between emotions and feelings that you use in your slides?
The word emotion is an English word that is a combination of different things, of feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. The word feeling, if we use it from the Pali terminology, is something very basic and rudimentary. Feeling means whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. From the Pali point of view, that's what is feeling. There's no Pali word for emotion. Emotion is strictly an English word. The word emotion connotes feelings, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, as well as thoughts, what's going on in your mind, as well as perceptions, how do you perceive things, all right? All these contribute to an emotion. An emotion could be something positive or negative. Most of the time it's used in a negative way. But in a positive way, this could refer to the 4 Brahma Viharas. Having loving kindness is an emotion, is a positive emotion. Having sympathetic joy, having compassion, having equanimity, these are positive emotions. Negative emotions are those accompanied by unpleasant feelings. All right, so that's how the word Emotions and feelings are used in this context. Emotions covers a wider range. Emotion also involves physical sensations, right? Physical sensations, feelings, thoughts, perceptions is a composite. Okay, hope that answers the question. Okay, anyone else?
The perceptions here is only referring to the sanya as in the 5 aggregates, or including sankhara and sanya both?
The Pali words used for this is vitakka, vedana, and sanya. And vitakka means initial thinking. Right? It's different from vichara. Vichara is continual or discursive thinking. So vitakka is the initial thought that arises. Okay? Then vedana is feeling, just pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And sanya here refers to spontaneous memory or identification. Right? Sanya, from the Buddhist terminological point of view, it has 2 functions. One is to remember what it has cognized before in the past. Right? Recognition. To recognize what has already been cognized in the past. That's the first. The second is, if it is not something that has been cognized in the past, it's something brand new, then it will identify. It will register. So that next time it can recognize. Understand? So that's a very basic and rudimentary function of sanya, either to recognize or to identify. The English word perception is something else. The English word perception has a wider meaning. It also means interpreting. You perceive something in a certain way, there's interpretation involved. Whereas in the Pali usage of the word sanya, it's more rudimentary. And then when you talk about having an interpretation, that would involve the 4th aggregate, sankhara, intentions and volitions. Whereas sanya is non-volitional. Yeah? Sanya is non-volitional, it's something spontaneous, although it could be the result of volitional activity. Like mindfulness will influence your sanya. Okay, anyone else?
We read about observing mind and experiencing mind. May I know how many minds do you have?
We have millions and millions of minds. There's a problem with the English language. You know, English language, the word mind is singular. You only have one mind. You don't have more than one. But in Pali, the word citta is singular and plural. So we have many minds. It's actually different events, mental events that arise and pass away. The problem is if we use English, then we have this wrong view already. There's only a permanent mind. Yeah? But from the ultimate point of view, from the experiential point of view, there are many mental events happening due to causes and conditions. Okay, anyone else?
Bhante, you mentioned that when we go for retreats, we will have exotic experiences as compared with exotic or whatever you call it. Sorry, I may use the wrong word, but that's what the memory that went into my mind. As compared with open awareness. So my question is, then why do people then go for retreats? Then I might as well keep practicing open awareness until the day I die. Less pain, less solitude, less stress, I should say. Thank you.
It's just like people saying the Buddha said this, the Buddha said that. There's no sutta reference. So I never use the word exotic. Luckily I'm still alive. The Buddha is not alive to say anything. I say spectacular. Yeah, spectacular experiences. That's also the problem with sanya, you know. We only remember what we want to remember. I say spectacular, but she remembered exotic. Well, as I said, the practice of open awareness, I say, it's not an independent practice. It is supplementary and complementary to retreat situation. The Buddha also encouraged his monks to practice some sort of focused awareness to get the jhanas, to get the abhinyas. Sometimes you would ask them to get the abhinyas, the psychic powers, before actually even embarking on vipassana. Right? So, but the Buddha knew best what is best for each person. Some people need a high degree of samadhi and to see in very, very detail in order to be satisfied that things are anicca, dukkha, anatta. Okay? Some people don't. Some people just need to see the surface and that's good enough for them. There's this interesting story in the Samyutta Nikaya called the Kingsukopama Sutta. There was one monk who went around asking different monks how they got enlightened. Actually, he's asked, to what extent is there purification of view? And so one monk says, well, as long as you are able to see the rising and passing away of the 6 bases of contact, right, which are the 6 senses. And then that's what one monk said. Then he went to see another monk, and the other monk said, well, as long as you can see the rising and passing of the 5 aggregates. Then he went to another monk, and the other monk said, as long as you can see the rising and passing of the 4 great elements. Then he went to another monk, and the other monk says, well, as long as you can see that whatever has the nature of arising has the nature of cessation. And this monk was really confused. What do? Do I observe the 6 senses, or the 5 aggregates, or the 4 great elements, or just whatever arises has the nature of cessation? So he was so confused, he went to ask the Buddha, and the Buddha told him, all of them have attained their awakening, but it's just that they spoke from different angles according to their disposition. Right? So we cannot really say that one single method is best for everybody. It depends on what is good for you. Yeah, so many things are available in the market. You go to a mall, you go and window shop and see whatever fits you. The best criteria, the best yardstick is to see whether whatever method that you're using helps you to be more mindful, composed, and have more clear awareness, and your defilements are becoming less and less, not more. Okay? And that you are getting more peace in your life, you are having more wholesome qualities like acceptance, forgiveness, understanding, patience, generosity, kindness, and so forth. Look at the positive qualities, and look at the reduction of negative qualities and the increase of positive qualities. I think that's the best yardstick. Rather than any spectacular any spectacular experience, that makes you think that you are a Sotapan or Sakadagami. You can get such experiences, but the problem is you might get this in a retreat. When you get back to your life, you're not going to get that again. And that may not be the best criterion to judge whether you are awakened or not. You have a particular experience, but it's not as important as the consequences of that experience. What does the experience do to you? Does it really help you to become a better person? More positive qualities and less negative qualities? Or it makes you more proud? Oh, I've attained already, I'm really Sotapan now. Okay, anyone else?
Could we do a short exercise on practicing open awareness? A short one. I think not today. Yeah.
Okay, just now I actually gave you a short session. I said you are aware of your body, and you step back and look at the space in between you and me rather than looking at me. Right. That is sort of open awareness. It's like stepping back and be aware of what's happening to your senses, not getting absorbed in any single object. Right? Well, it's got something to do with open eyes. Sometimes people say this open eye meditation. They don't call it open awareness meditation. They call it open eye meditation because usually people practice with their eyes closed. And then they always ask me, why must I practice with my eyes open? So distracting, cannot concentrate, cannot focus. That's the problem. Because you train your mind to meditate only when your eyes are closed. So when your eyes are open, 别走了. So how useful would that be in your daily life? So might as well train your mind to practice with the eyes open. actually is a very, very good opportunity to see how your mind works. How the mind is so capable, you know. Every single thing you see, you will comment. Right? If you close your eyes, you don't see all these things. You don't know, you think you're a saint, you're so focused, you're so nice and serene. But the moment you open your eyes, you know, all these things will come. Right? And that's why it's so important. Open your eyes and look at your mind, look at the thoughts. See how they arise. Even if you have any comments or any nasty comments or judgments on people, that's not you. You didn't purposely think that. It came about because of past conditioning and present circumstances. Right? So look at that. Don't be too judgmental on yourself. You know, when you're judgmental on others, that is also another negative emotion. Just look at things as not me, not mine, not myself, due to cause and conditioning. Okay, I think that's enough for today.